everyone, welcome today to episode 7 of Berlin Noir, and we are going to be working on the museum island of the northern half, or northern tip at least, of this island here in Berlin, and it was suggested by one of you to do this, and it was already on my list to do this type of thing not long after I was building the train stations, but I figured I might as well do this next since I've already expanded a good portion of the city, at least the blockhouses and just rows of buildings in this area, and it pretty much goes right up next to this island, so logically it made sense to start this next. And originally I thought it would be not too hard. I mean, just, a few buildings, museums, there's some decent assets on the workshop that I could at least make it look like they were the actual buildings. Like here, using PO to shrink down one of these buildings to make them narrow. But it turned out it was much more difficult than I expected. After I had recorded everything and cut out some of the stuff in between, the filler stuff, me just not doing anything, whatever it is, and even some stuff that's I could have placed in the video, but after I cut out all that stuff, sped it up to the normal time-lapse speed, I had over 40 minutes of footage, and obviously I was like, no, I'm not gonna be making a video that's 40 minutes long. I mean, I know it's, at least personally, 20 minutes is sometimes even hard to sit there and watch an entire video of someone just talking, and unless it's extremely interesting build, sure, but for the most part, anything more than 25 minutes just gets kind of long. So I went in and cut out a ton more stuff, and as you can see, it's still a pretty long video at just about 31 and a half minutes, but I still left in enough so you know exactly what I'm doing, but I cut out some of the filler detailing that's nothing special or anything, just kind of your average detailing that you see in my videos and everyone else's. So, but yeah, that's where we're at 31 and a half minute video. So let's get into it, I guess. So I began here building this northern tip museum here on the little tip of this island. It's an interesting shape and also location, just wedged here between the rails there and, just the edge, the tip of the peninsula. So I had to use PO on everything here in order to just make some custom buildings and kind of squish it together to make it look somewhat like the actual building in real life. For the dome there, at the very, very start of the video, you might have saw me sinking a building down. That is the Berliner Dome, which I will place at later in the video where it's supposed to be, but I couldn't really think of any large domed asset, at least that I had readily available in my subscriptions here, but I just sunk it down, used PO, got rid of the little spire thing on top, and just put actually the vanilla gazebo or whatever it's called, just that little green thing there on top. It happened to match more or less the color and texture, so I thought that looked alright. But this one definitely took a lot of time, just messing around with PO and trying to make it look right, trying to get the correct angle, because I did make the building a little more narrow than the one in real life, which more or less just happened that way. It wasn't something intentional, but I did add these little keys here along the river, which I actually like this compared to the regular or real life, I guess, building. That's more or less just the building is the wall along the river, which is cool and all, but also building in game, the textures below a building are kind of usually just plain. So I thought, just for appearance sake, the aesthetic side, but also honestly I thought it looked cool this way, to add the keys there. And actually eventually towards the end of the video, I put in some paths, which I might have cut out, actually not, I don't remember, but I just add some paths so people can actually walk along there, and it looks quite nice. But yeah, so I had to use which fortunately I actually just stumbled across it before I went to build this build, which I'm not sure if it's a new asset or not, but a second ago, the middle part there of the bridge is just an elevated road, but it doesn't have all the bridge-like features. So it doesn't have the sidewalks, it doesn't have the railings. It's just the road, which makes you or allows you to make any sort of custom bridge, and not have to worry about the kind of ugly bridge features in the vanilla game if you want to do something special or something like this here. So like an entrance straight off the bridge, which is a really cool design. I mean, I'm not sure who built this. It was a couple hundred years ago, the real life building, but it's an interesting design, seeing as at least the main entrance. I'm not sure if there's other entrances, but I didn't see one, at least on Google Earth. But the only entrance that I could see was right there in the very front along the bridge. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. There probably is a side entrance. I wouldn't be surprised if there is, but I don't know. It still looked cool. But I added these actual like walkway. I'm not really sure what to call them, but I actually use these later in the video. But I add these in the front there just to make them look like some sort of doors or entrances, so it wasn't just a glass dome like was there a second ago. But I placed some crowd generators in there so people actually look like they're walking through the front doors. So that's pretty neat. But anyhow, in the middle here, I just use more of those narrow walkway. I honestly don't know what to call them, but I just wanted them, at least in this case here in the middle of the building, to look like they're just narrow hallways connecting between exhibits in the museum, as the real one has, though these are much more smaller and narrow, or more narrow. But I mean, if I put anything larger in there, it wouldn't have really been any space in between the buildings. It kind of would have looked bad. So I just went with this. But so here's when I start, I guess, the bulk of the work. This is where I spent probably most of my time, seeing that there's 3 museum buildings here and some small thing off to the side. But as you see, that top part there, the larger one, just randomly appeared. That's because I actually didn't record. I don't know why I didn't. I was just building, trying to figure out what to use with PO, and just never actually hit record, which I guess in the end turned out alright, because it wasn't anything that special. It was just 3 buildings, more or less just placed like that. I did use PO on the 2 white wings that stick off from the main one, but you already saw me do that with the previous building, to use PO and shrink the exact same building down. But yeah, I had to do a lot of searching for what sort of assets to use here. I mean, the large museum that I was just talking about that I didn't record, that one looks decent, resembles the real life one pretty decently, I would say, even though I actually use the concert hall asset there, that green one, as the entrance, though I did use PO to remove the front statue on the roof, and I just place a flag on top there just so it doesn't look like really similar to the concert hall building that I built in the Gendarmenmarkt episode previously. But ideally, I'm not sure if like something with this. I know PO allows you to recolor some buildings, but I'm not sure if that's any building or just certain buildings that the asset creator allows to be compatible with PO in order to change the color. That's what I think. Could be wrong, but I would have liked to have changed the roof color, or at least not the roof color, but the green color, just to something so it doesn't look as similar to the actual concert hall that I placed before. I mean, it's not a big deal. I know there's a building color changer mod or whatever it is that I could have used, but I don't like installing mods just for one single thing, because if I do that, then next thing you know, I had double my number of mods and assets, and it's a slippery slope, at least when it comes to me and installing possibly useful mods and assets. But it looks alright here. But here is what I mentioned earlier with the very first museum that I was building. These little walkway props are actually buildings. The real life location has something like this, though it is open on both sides, whereas this one here is closed off on the street side, which I kind of like that sense. Like, it makes the museum area seem, a bit more private, a bit nicer, so not just anyone can come off the street. And I mean, I don't know, at least from an American standpoint. I'm sure it's different in Germany, but yeah, I guess, closing something off gives it a higher standard. But yeah, I go ahead and lay those down, and also along that right river quay there, I extend it down that way as well. But so I guess one thing I did do outside of just doing making this episode is I finally figured a way to make an asset list that you all can look at and access, and actually go straight to the workshop link. It's not the traditional way of creating a collection, since I've previously mentioned that I wasn't able to do that, since this account that I'm using to build this city is a family shared account, which Steam doesn't let you do a collection in if you're using a family shared account. But what I did do was use the loading mod report, thanks to several of you that recommended me doing that. Finally figured a way how to make a Google Doc using one of the export logs, and it actually, to some degree, it's actually better than the actual usual route of having a workshop collection, because this way it actually sorts the assets by categories. So trees, buildings, special buildings, props, whatever, networks, all that type of stuff. It sorts it so you can actually what's that road, look through it and find it. And it still does, as I mentioned, give you a link to the actual workshop page, so you can actually download whatever assets you see and like. But I'd say the best part is it only gives you the assets that I have currently used in the videos. So whereas I have about, I think now I have 2,500-ish assets installed for this city. I've only probably used, I don't know, let's just say 1,000. So instead of getting 2,500 assets on a very, very long list, you're only going to get the 1,000 that I've used up to this point. So, for those of you that have been asking me, finally got around to it, finally figured a way, so hopefully that works for you. But, so here is one example of me trying to fill in a lot of empty space in this area. I just placed a little park there with some paths and a little statue, some sort of exhibit, I guess, related to the museum right there. But yeah, so this area here is definitely wider than the real life location. I have a lot more land to work with. So I did have to just place a bunch of stuff into all the space in between, and also the angles the buildings were aligned was different, because the real museums here are pretty much lined up with just 90 degrees right angles from each other, whereas this I kind of have them angled slightly, so it just made for a bit more of a hassle than if I had stuck to the actual real life layout. But I tried to trying to line up the roads and the rivers, but I also had to keep the rivers here as narrow as possible, because they are kind of thick, at least the ones that I finished, because most of the rivers around here I haven't actually put the river keys on both sides or buildings, so they're not finished yet. But where I have, it's still pretty wide compared to the actual river that runs through here. So, I mean, I guess that's not a super big deal, but I do like that narrow river look and just a small little bridge going over. It looks nice. But I'll try and do that other places where it's narrow and I, have the opportunity to fix that. But I guess I can... last week I didn't post a video. Just kind of had a busy week. Busy birthday week, actually. But when I had the opportunity to sit down and open up the game, I just wasn't feeling it. I mean, we all, have those moments where maybe not necessarily in the game, but whatever our, real life activities, passions are, work, whatever it is, sometimes you aren't feeling it. And that was me pretty much all last week. And I mean, I'm sure, you guys would rather me, release a quality video with good builds rather than just kind of pump one out. Because, obviously I don't want this game, or at least not the game, but making the videos and releasing the videos to feel like a chore, more or less. I want it to be something that I enjoy, which, don't get me wrong, I really love the process of recording, editing videos, and, recording the commentary and publishing them to YouTube. So, but, sometimes it's just nice to have a short break there when you're not feeling your creative juices running or something. But, so that was me last week, but here we are, back this week with an episode. So, occasionally, I'll probably just skip a week if busy or just, not feeling creative, whatever it may be. But, yeah, just to let you guys know, because, preferably I'd be able to let you guys know rather than in a following video, but, until I have 1,000 subs, I'm not able to access any sort of the community tab that the larger accounts have that they can, send messages to subscribers. If you follow me on Instagram, you can both get updates on something like that, but also just see, images of what I've built so far. Nice, picturesque, photorealistic, in-game footage that I post there. So go ahead, the link is in the description there for my Instagram, so if you haven't checked it out there, suggest you do. I don't know, it's cool. But anyways, moving on back to redetailing this museum here. Tried to change up the textures of the concrete here. As you can see here, I used the stone, and just a second ago I was using PO to edit a decal of like worn down road or asphalt, whatever, with the cobblestone showing from beneath it, which is a pretty cool look. So I thought I'd use that in that one spot there. But yeah, the cobblestone decals there a second ago in front of the one museum. And also this is another one here, but I'm not sure what asset collection it is, but it's a very nice collection of cobblestone decals, various sizes and shapes. You got circle, square, triangle, large square. You got the angled ones for like road corners, but it's a very nice collection. You get 3 different stone decals in the pack, which I've been using a lot since I've found it. Also placing behind buildings, but also I've been trying to put them in front of buildings and using them like this just to change up the textures of the normally gray cobblestone that I have as my pavement texture, which when you zoom up on it, it's a very nice texture, very detailed, but zoomed out it more or less just looks like standard pavement, that's not stone but paved, which kind of sucks. I would prefer maybe a different texture that looks more like cobblestone, like the decals here, but now that I have more decals to lay down, it's alright. But in this tiny area here, I was gonna just place some trees. I'm like, yeah, I've done that. I want to be unique, so I was like, you know what, let's make a tiny maze. So just got some of the hedge networks and started making a maze. I mean, I considered cutting it out because it's more or less just 2 minutes of me trying to figure out how to make a maze, but yeah, I guess it's something unique that isn't in many videos. But I end up putting a little centerpiece with a bench and a nice tree, you know, for a couple to go to or whatever it may be to visit. But yeah, like I said, wanted to break up the monotony of just placing down trees or bushes or flowers, so went with this, and it looks pretty cool. Fits, I suppose. The hedges are really tall, which I probably could prefer to use shorter ones, but the only other option is, as you can see there in the search bar there's 2 options for networked hedges, and the other one was a little wider, but it is shorter, but I wanted the more narrow hedges so there'd be more room to lay out the maze. But yeah, here, as you can see, this is a little centerpiece for, you know, just one little bench, some flower bushes around it, and then a little tree there in the middle that I place in a second, which, yeah, looks cool. But I guess moving on from that, I mean, nothing much to it. It was fun though, making a maze, I must say. You know, I didn't look at anything. When I first started, I was like, I should probably look at something, but I did cut out my beginning troubleshooting, me trying to figure out how to make a maze. I used to draw mazes when I was little. That was something I did for whatever reason, but it's been a few years since then. But this tiny little area here, triangular shaped piece of land, this I visited probably after every little build. I would go over to this and just stare at it and be like, all right, what the heck am I going to put here? This is probably my 4th or 5th time coming over here, and finally it's like, you know, I'll just put just a little row of cars parked here, maybe some sort of valet service, if that was a thing back then. I honestly don't know. But I didn't fill this entire area with parking, though I was considering it, but I was like, this is kind of probably fit in like a little roundabout looking thing. So I just placed some worn out stain decals so I don't actually lay any roads in the shape of a roundabout, because that probably would not have worked. Plus I would have risked screwing up the terrain around here with the key, and I just didn't want to mess around with that. As I mentioned already, the keys can just really screw with your terrain, so I just let it be there and just use the decals to make it look like there's some sort of roundabout, and just place a little fountain there in the middle. And cars, I did lay there's one network of road going around it, so cars do go around it, but the actual roundabout itself, you know, they don't use. But so here is the last little section of the museum island for this episode. This is the Berliner Dome, which unfortunately it's a fairly low poly, fairly undetailed asset. It's the only one on the workshop, but you know, from a distance it looks plenty fine, but up close for screenshots, it's not the best. But yeah, so as you see, like I mentioned earlier, the dome of this building is what I used for the very, very first museum on the tip of the island, on the northern part. But so here I actually did use part of the building, such as in real life, to act as like an actual, I guess, part of the river wall. So I did throw it right up against the river, and then I put this here where you actually have to go down the stairs, walk along the river, and back up the stairs if you want to continue walking along this point, which is what I copied from Google Earth, which actually for this build, which was a nice change compared to like some of the previous ones, like the train stations from the previous episodes. But I was able to use, not exclusively, but more than half, probably like 3/4 of the time, I referenced Google Earth over images or the Tagesspiegel satellite 1928 view that I've been using as well, which, because just from looking at the older images and satellite views from back then, it doesn't seem much has changed. I mean, the buildings definitely have remained the same, except for one museum or gallery that, at least that I noticed, that was on the previous section that I was building, which I did not place because from what I could gather, there was nothing there originally. But yeah, so here we are, just placing stairs. I cut out building the stairs on the right side just to save time, to cut out, repetitive nature of just building stairs. And it took a very long time, not in the time lapse, of course, because it's sped up, but it's a pain trying to deal with the networks there, a lot of nodes and stuff with the keys and the walls, and also building along rivers and just water in general. If you aren't paused, your camera can like bob up and down, and even if you are paused, your camera can just like shoot up and down randomly, which drives me nuts. But yeah, so all that kind of just combines to make building something like this a bit more of a hassle than it should be. But so here we finally build the I guess the Berliner Dome. I mean, I don't think it was. I'm guessing it wasn't originally a museum, but this one here, I for at least what I understand, was originally some sort of museum. And this is an actual asset that is the actual Altis Museum. So, I didn't have to use PO or mess around with combining buildings, which was a nice change. So, building this whole little section here with this building and the Berliner Dome was much quicker than the middle part there that I was building earlier. But I still had a lot of space to fill in here. For the most part, I just laid down these really large stone networks. I think they're actually Paris cobblestone networks. I think they're the road texture, if I'm not mistaken, of a actual theme. But I just use them here as just walkways. But it doesn't match at least the walkways here don't match what actually was back then. Mostly just because it wasn't a super symmetrical, this area here, as is compared to the real life location. So I just kind of went with some random shape here. Though I did place a little fountain there, as there is in real life, in front of the museum, which I've been using this little fountain here. This is a Paris fountain a lot. It's very nice. It's got the steps, which are optional. You can place it with or without the steps, and the fountain is animated, which is cool as well. So yeah, I use that a lot more. Just placed here some random statue. Couldn't remember what it is if I tried. Some dude on a horse. But here I just figured there were trees in real life, though this area here was much more narrow, but I didn't really know what else to place here, so I just placed down a bunch of big old trees and just filled it right there, as you can see. But and then this here is the last part of the video, just finishing detailing the one side of the Berliner Dome here. I don't know, at this part, or at least this point of building, I was this whole video, or I shouldn't say the whole video, but one of, like, usually when I build in like 1 to 2 hour segments, but this one was over 3 hours, building a lot. So I was pretty done at this point, just laying a bunch of bushes. So I was like, okay, I just need for my own sanity, I need to finish this up and move on, which moving on was more or less finishing the video. But yeah, still wanted to leave it detailed enough that it looked alright. But I don't know, I may revisit some areas here just to make sure everything looks good and this is the best that it can be. But for now, this is what it is. But so we're getting pretty close to the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I know it's a longer video, so I'll make sure to try and keep it to 20-ish minutes, 20-25 in the future, but sometimes just gotta make a longer one. But yeah, just finishing up with some quick detailing on the side. This grass part here in the very, very front, I just ended up just leaving grass just for people to gather out, for picnics, whatever it may be. But yeah, that is going to be it for the episode. Hope you enjoyed. And see you next week for the next episode.